Okay, well, I'm delighted to have with me today Nesrine Chengal. Hi, Nezrin.
Hi, Tim.
Good to see you. So Nezrin is a product coach and sort of well-known product person who has worked at some fantastic companies, Microsoft, Google, Spotify. We'll get into all that in a second, and is now speaking and writing about product delight. And I'm really keen to get into that aspect as well. So it's great to have you on the call, Nezrin. But just to start off with, yeah, it'd be great to just hear a bit about your product journey. So, you've worked for a lot of really well-known product companies and worked on some massive products as well that we're all very familiar with, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So maybe the thing that people are not fully aware of is that my very beginning, like my the start of my career, was not supposed to be in product management, because I actually did an engineering and then I got myself even deeper in tech because I did a PhD on signal processing and video compression. And I
Okay.
even started my career as a research engineer at Bell Labs here in Paris. So my first 5 years in my professional career started as a researcher, but then at some point I started to realize that I'm missing the practical side, because when you're a researcher, of course, you create a lot of innovation, but then you hand it over to another department so that they decide what to do with it.
Hmm.
So that's how I get to the product management, because I really want, I'm talking about maybe 18 years ago now. And
Okay.
at that time, talking about product management was not that much heard, at least.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of research and I came into job description as part of Skype, as part of Microsoft in Sweden. So I moved from Paris to Sweden, and that's how I get to product management as a video PM at Skype. It's
Interesting.
funny because I'm telling you this story, and at that time we introduced things like video group calling, for example. And
Stuff we
you
take for
imagine,
granted now.
yes, yes, it's so granted today.
Yeah, that's great. And I can't tell you the number of product managers who start the conversation off with, I never meant to get into product management, or some version of that, some kind of, actually I started off as like, it could be anything, right? And it's amazing how product managers, and it's brilliant that they come from so many different domains, but like, I studied psychology at university, or, I never knew what a product manager was. And I think we all sort of walk around with a little bit of FOMO about that, because or a bit of sort of, self-doubt around that, because, it's not like you go to university and study product management and there's always stuff to learn. I think we all feel like we're sort of imposters slightly.
Yeah, but I think in my case it was not a full random fall into product management, because since I did my PhD on video compression, at that time Microsoft was extremely interested in my technical background toward like signal processing and video compression, and that's how I ended becoming a technical PM as part of Skype. And then I actually continued within that, because after Skype I moved to Spotify, again within media, like compression of audio. And the interesting part at Spotify is that my team and we introduced video into Spotify. So when I joined Spotify, it was audio only. And then we introduced things like video podcast and clips and so many video materials as well at Spotify. And then, of course, I continued within that path, because after Spotify, I moved to Google Meet. And Google Meet, I kept. So just telling this story, because sometimes the background matter. And in my case, like my background, I kept my background with me in every step of my PM career.
Yeah, and that's really, yeah, absolutely. You can kind of see that thread. And again, I see that a lot with PMs, even if they move companies and domains, often as in kind of, commercial verticals. I often find that there's a thread, right? Either their career is built on like marketplace or whatever. Like there might be, but there's always something in there, I think, that is a constant. Yeah, thank you for bringing those skills to those products, because certainly Spotify video podcasts and things fantastic. And I've heard you talk. I'm obviously researching for this. I've kind of listened to some of your other kind of interviews, and I heard you talking about your time at Google Meets, for example. The start of COVID, and when everybody was in those products for large chunks of their lives. and you did a lot of fantastic work there as well.
Yeah, I think Google Meet was a very interesting story to share, and I love sharing this story particularly because what people maybe don't know is that I joined Google Meet team exactly when COVID hit, like exactly at the right start of the pandemic. And of course, it's an interesting time for Google, particularly like for Google Meet, because people moved from having all calls in offices, classrooms, clinics to 100% online. And that, of course, represent quite important things to take care of from a scale perspective, but also as a PM I had to address the psychological impact of this new behavior, like from moving from office to home. And that's one thing that I addressed a lot during my PM journey at Google Meet, like how can we make Google Meet more exciting, more delightful, and less of a boring time.
It's so interesting, and probably, well, maybe I hope there won't be another scenario like that again, where there's just such a shift overnight in terms of the way everybody is kind of behaving and working. I mean, to some degree, we were sort of lucky that it happened when it happened, in that there was technology available to support businesses and keep industry kind of moving. If it had happened, early 2000s, I'm sure there would have been a very different impact.
Yeah, but at the same time, what's interesting, especially for PMs listening, or as for me as a PM, is that sometimes some features are somehow in the corner, just waiting for the right scenario to happen. I'm talking, for example, for background replace as a feature
Yes.
that we enabled particularly during COVID. I mean, it may feel weird now that I'm telling you that like background replace and background blur came exactly with COVID, just because there was no need to hide or to protect privacy before, or at least the need was not that big.
Yeah.
And since we all moved into like this scenario of having calls from kitchen, from rooms, it became suddenly such a big need that as a PM, of course, you have to adjust your priority and make that feature happen, whatever it
Yes.
is.
And it also introduced what we're going to get into talking about around product delight. And I can certainly remember, at that time I was working for a cybersecurity company as a PM for a cybersecurity company, and so we obviously started having our kind of stand-ups and everything online, and very quickly a sort of competition evolved where people were trying to come with the most extreme and fantastic backgrounds and kind of interesting stuff. Which again just created some of that delight. It removed some of the boredom and and made added a depth and an interest to that product.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it starts as a functionality. So from the very beginning of the feature, start from a need for functionality. But then the interesting part is also to look at what are the other motivators behind. In addition to the functional motivator, is there any emotional motivator or psychological motivator? And that's why I think you brought a great example, like when you said people are being very creative with their background, for the fact that they want to be, of course, present, they want to be seen, they want to be heard. So it's not only for protecting privacy, which was the start of the feature, but turns into something much bigger and more fun sometimes.
Yeah, amazing. I guess there's a whole branch there where you can go down with kind of jobs to be done theory when you're thinking about functional jobs and emotional jobs and the things that people are trying to do. Nezrin, we're heading off into the direction of product delight, which is fantastic. Before we go there, very keen to just talk for you to just sort of articulate a little bit about what you mean about product delight. For some time now, it's been kind of trendy to talk about delightful products. But I don't know whether people, it's sort of just become part of the vernacular. I don't know whether people really scratch beneath the surface and go, well, certainly don't go as deep as you have into it. So, yeah, it'd be great to just understand a bit more about what we mean by product delight.
So when I first started talking about delight, I felt that it's a bit risky to talk about delight because exactly as you said, it's a bit like a buzzword nowadays. Like everyone is talking about we should delight our users. But let's be honest, very few know exactly how to. But at least I started from the concept that there is a consensus and there is at least an agreement that yes, it's important to delight our users. Now, the question is what delight is actually. And Based on my experience and all the product I've been working on, I came to the conclusion that the best product, like the real product that stand out, particularly in this very crowded market, are those that do not only offer functional or they don't only solve for functional need, as we said earlier, but also address some emotional need. So delight comes from the fact that you create emotional connection between the product and the user. So you start to feel something toward the product. Do you see what I mean? So let's take an example. Like if you book a flight, that's a functional need. If you send an SMS or if you book a hotel, these are functional needs. Now, what could be the emotional need? It could be the fact that you want to feel less lonely or you want to feel connected. So these are the things, for example, when I worked at Spotify, we addressed a lot. Like people, of course, want to listen to music. That's a functional need. But most of the time, people go to Spotify because they want to feel less lonely or they want to feel productive or they want to feel part of something. And if you put those two together, so I'm not the one here telling you that we need to address only emotional need. I'm here to say that the best product is the one that serve for functional need, but also address, in addition to that, the emotional need to create emotional connection.
Amazing. Yeah, I get that. And I'm sure, well, hopefully people listening, and certainly in my mind, I'm sort of trying to think of examples of that where, and actually I think Slack is, back in the day was probably a really good example of that, in that they actually weren't doing anything technically interesting or different. There'd been IRCs around, but the way that they implemented that, and actually they were very clever in their initial audiences, who were mainly kind of tech audiences, with kind of integrations and just those little touches that made it really interesting.
Brought a great example. Like Slack is a brilliant example, particularly during that COVID time where they distinguished themselves particularly with their great design, but also with the emotional connection element that's in the product. So for example, the fact that you can customize your emoji, you can represent yourself in the product, but also sometimes in small touches. I'm going to give you a small example in Slack, particularly one day they had nothing in their updates. So you go to the app and you try to update your app, and sometimes you have the release notes and it happens that they have nothing. And instead of saying, we don't have any update or something, they just use the interface to say, hey, we hope you're doing great. Think about being nice to each other and have a great day. I mean, even the conversation and the way how you treat and you talk to your users matter, because we need to feel that there are real human behind the product. And that's the difficulty, by the way. Your product has to highlight the fact that there are real human behind the product.
Yeah, that's an amazing example, and I hope whoever runs product marketing at Slack got a pay rise after that. And we're all probably pretty fed up of reading release notes that just say like bug fix or something, just something really boring and tedious. So that's great. Thank you, Nezrin. And does this work for every product? I know that maybe sort of 5 years ago, actually. Gibson Biddle talked a lot about delight in product HM strategy at Netflix, which he does a great talk about actually. And then lots of product teams that I spoke to after that would always say like their strategies were all about delighting customers. And I always used to think, well, like my accounting package, I don't really need my accounting package to delight me, right? The least time I spend in that product, the better. I just need to know that it's handling what it needs to handle. Is this applicable to every product?
Okay, let me be honest. I also had this thought as well in my head, because most of my experience are related to B2C product. Like I worked at Skype, Spotify, Google Meet. Like Google Meet is, let's say, half-half. Like we also addressed Google Meet for B2B. But so what I did while like doing research about this delight is actually I interviewed a lot of product directors from different industries that I don't have particular experience with. So the two industries that I put a lot of focus interviewing are let's say the tech heavy industry. So for example, I interviewed people from Snowflake or GitHub.
Nice. Okay.
And I asked about the perspective of emotional connection there. And the other industry that I interviewed a lot is the B2B industry, because I wanted to see the place of delight in the B2B industry. So I interviewed people from Atlassian for the Jira product, for example. I interviewed people from T-Sheet. I'm going to talk about an example from T-Sheet. I don't know if you're aware about that, but I want to jump on the T-Sheet example because it's exactly what you're referring to.
Like, go for it.
So I spoke with the head of product of T-Sheet. T-Sheet is a product that is just tracking time. You know, when you're working in a company and your employer is asking you for filling in a sort of tool with how many hours you work. Don't nobody love that, and people even hates that. The only reason why you do that is because you have to do in
Yeah,
order to be paid, right? I mean, there is no other reason for it.
yeah.
And what's interesting is when I spoke with Jen, like the ex-VP of that product, by the way, it got acquired by Intuit, is that she told me that they did their best to make it less boring. Yes, the perspective is like people think about it as a boring tool, but for example, instead of telling you, hey, it's been you having a delay in entering your time record, they're giving you a bit of fun messages like, hey, you're beating record compared to your employee, or you're giving you some comparison and ranking in terms of how fast are you in entering your time tracking
Great.
details. So it become, of course, it's not going to change the nature of the setting, but it will change a little bit the perspective and the view toward the product. So yes, there is a place for delight in all products, and that's why when I get the question about B2B versus B2C, I say that as long as there are human being using the product at the end of the journey, then we're talking about B2H, which is the business to human rather than
Yeah.
customer or business. So they of course they deserve their emotion to be honored.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And I still shudder from earlier on in my career when I had to buy an ERP system for the business I was working in. And it was just horrendous. And I still have nightmares worrying about the pain that I inflicted on, 100 plus people in the organization who had to do timesheets and all that kind of stuff. Because this was, back in the bad old days of B2B software, right, where it was made to sell, and they didn't really think about who the users would be and how it would. Okay, so that's great. Imagine, if I'm a sort of ambitious PM and I want to obviously start thinking about this stuff and implementing it in my product, or maybe I'm a founder and I'm sort of building V1. How do I go about sort of thinking about this stuff? How do I sort of fold it into my processes and start to bring some emotion to my products?
Yes. Good question, because when I thought about this, I came with what I call the delight model. So the delight model is a step-by-step process that people can actually follow in order to achieve the desired outcome. And the very first step is about identifying motivators. So it's a four-step process, but the first one, which for me is the very important one and people should not skip, is to identify the real motivators. And when I say motivators, there are of course the functional motivators, and also try to take time to speak to your users to identify the emotional motivators. What motivates your users to use your product on an emotional side? Because actually it's extremely easy to identify the functional motivator. I told you earlier, I want to listen to music, I want to listen to podcasts, but what's the exact emotional motivator behind it? That's what need to take, you need to take time and you need to interview your users on a long-term perspective in order to identify those. Just think about receiving a gift, by the way. The best gift you receive on a personal level is not just the random gift. It's not the random gift. It's the one that is related to your value or to your taste or to your preferences, right? The more the person knows you, the better the gifts start to become, right? And then that's exactly the same. Treat your users as you are giving them a gift. And the more you speak to them and understand them on the psychological and emotional level, the better the gift become. So the very first step I want to highlight it is that you need to start listing, and it's a list. You need to list what are the functional motivators and what are the emotional motivators. If you have that list, that's an amazing start. Why? Because once you start brainstorming on the solution, you will have to map those solutions on those motivators. Is it solving any of those functional or emotional motivators? So you are sure that whatever you're offering your users is very much related to what motivates them to use your product.
Amazing, amazing, and obviously great. You know, first stage, speak to customers, right? Tick, go out and talk to them, understand. But I love that. I love that. Yeah, understand that emotional driver. I wonder how many PMs are used to asking about like how people are feeling or what those emotional drivers are behind just the functional things. There's some tips on kind of questions to ask because I know, you know, obviously we've all spoken to lots of users, and often that's where they default to, and often they default to solutions as well as a way of articulating the problem. And you know, for years now, PMs have been trained to sort of dig into that. How do I get to the emotional questions?
Yes, that's a great question, by the way, because people think that they're doing users interview and then they are doing great. It's not about doing the user interview that matter. It's about doing it right. And there are techniques and there are a great way of doing it in order to touch the emotional perspective. So for example, there is a technique called motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is something that I'm writing about it in my book, where it's about interviewing users with a lot of empathy. It's with a lot of like deep listening. Instead of asking questions like tell me about what are your problem or your pain point, it's more about, for example, tell me about the last time you used the product and how you felt during the journey, and keep it open, and people will start to reflect and they will start I mean, it's about reminding them that they need to talk about their emotions as well. So try to follow steps and talk to your user in a completely open-ended style so that they can feel comfortable and they start to share real frustration or real needs from emotional side.
Okay, fantastic. And then what's the next stage, Nesrine? Where do we go from there? So we've spoken to users, we've got a list of our functional emotional needs. What's the next stage?
So first step is identifying motivators. Second step is to turn those motivators into real product opportunities. So you can use techniques like how might we or any type of statement, as long as you are converting those motivators into like a list of ideas for product opportunity. I'm going to give an example here. For example, when I joined Google Meet, of course, we know that we had to make sure that Google Meet works in the scale of the COVID time, but also as a PM, I spent a lot of time, like really months, trying to understand the emotional impact that this new behavior is having on users. And so we listed a list of motivators, like people want to feel present, people want to feel engaged, people want to feel like connected, because it was a barrier and people felt like behind when they are having calls behind the screen. So we listed those motivators and we converted those into potential product opportunities. For example, in the case of people said that there is a low interaction. I'm not interacting as I used to be in a classroom or in office. So we said, like, how might we improve the meeting experience in a way that we can allow users to have more interaction? And we enabled emoji reaction. You know, the emoji reaction feature, you can send thumb up or heart. It's aligned with that perspective. So the second step is to convert those motivators into product opportunities. Once you create those opportunities, then you start brainstorming on potential solutions. So it's actually a two-space process, like the opportunity space and the solution space. So when you get to the solution space, I created another tool that I'm calling the Delight Grid. And the Delight Grid is actually a simple visualization tool. So do you remember those emotional and functional motivators?
Yes.
You just have to put them in a grid.
Okay.
And once you have some ideas of solution, you place them in the grid based on what motivator does it solve for.
Okay.
Does it solve for an emotional motivator, or does it solve for a functional motivator, or does it solve for both? And the fact that you're placing these in the grid is fantastic for two reasons. First is because you are seeing if the solution is solving for a real motivator or not, because sometimes it doesn't solve for any motivator, so why the pain? And the second reason is because it helps you classify the type of feature, because if it's only for a functional motivator, I call this low delight feature. If it's only for an emotional motivator, then it's a surface delight. And if it's all for both, then it's what I call the deep delight. And here I want to give you an example of what is surface delight, because sometimes people are quickly asking, does it exist a feature that only solves for an emotional motivator and doesn't solve for functional? Yes, just think about Wrapped at Spotify. So the end of year retrospective that you received, is there any functional motivator behind that feature? Maybe not. So this is an example of surface delight. And the best product is the one that has the three types. You have to have some surface delight, some deep delight, and some low delight as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Nezrin. And I was thinking as you're talking there, just at that last point, presumably a mix. I mean, obviously the deep delight is fantastic, but I doubt you can get that across every feature in your product. And I would imagine if you were biased in any one direction, you'd have problems, right? If you just had surface delight, but not a lot of functionality, then you've got challenges. And likewise, if it's just a really basically boring product, then you've got challenges as well.
You got it right. I mean, for me, the best product is the one that is having a bouquet. And I even came up with the 50-40-10. So the 50-40-10 is a guiding policy, let's say, that tells you that you need to have 50% of low delight. Yes, don't be surprised. Of course, 50% of your roadmap should be about functionality mainly. 40% of deep delight, where of course it's functionality plus emotion, and only 10%. And that's where people sometimes get me wrong. Like they think that they need to change their roadmap to make it all emotional. No. It's only 10% of your roadmap that is supposed to be for features like Wrapped or for Canvas that we created for Spotify, just to create that brand and that personality that you want your product to have.
Yeah, I love that, and it's a great way of organizing and rationalizing those kind of product ideas and mapping them out visually. I can certainly see teams doing that, either remotely or on a big board and kind of figuring these things out and discussing them, which is tremendous. Nezrin, I don't feel like I'd be doing my job if I didn't ask about AI and delight, because it strikes me there's a big opportunity there with the sort of some of the sort of surface level magic that AI can produce, particularly around kind of personalization and potentially emotional contact. Be interesting to just hear your thoughts on that.
So in my perspective, when we are talking about emotion, AI is not that great so far. You may disagree with me on that, but I think what I'm talking about when I talk about delight is the fact that there are humans behind the product, and it's only human today that are able to detect the right emotion and to create for emotion. Of course, AI is getting improved in that sense, but it will never ever replace the human touch for that. So I feel like I'm the only one talking about emotion these days, and everyone is talking about AI, and I'm proud of that, to be honest, because we need, of course, a mix of machine, but also a mix of human. And today, humans are the best when it comes to serving the best for our users. So maybe that's not answering your question, but for me, it's complementary. So AI will be complementary, but we will have to rely on our employee in trying to identify the right emotional and functional motivators in that.
Okay. Great. And so, Nezrin, I've loved all of the stuff you've been talking about. I know you're writing a book. When do I find out more? How can I learn more about Product Delight?
Yes, so it's been a long journey so far, but I'm super excited that the book is start to take shape. The book, actually I have a big announcement because the book is gonna be available for pre-order starting from next week. So I don't know when are we gonna release the episode, but it's starting from mid-June, and the official launch for the book will be available on Amazon starting from mid-September. So for those curious about learning more about delight and even to bring delight into their product, there will be a lot of tools and templates and actually a lot of examples. I love the fact that I was able to put a lot of examples so people can relate and they can also map to their real products. So the book is not only actionable but also inspiring as well. So I think everyone will get what they need from there.
Well, I will certainly be one of the first people to register and try and get hold of a copy, because it sounds terrific, and I've enjoyed hearing all about the different techniques and opportunities that you've talked about today. Nezrin, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I've learnt a ton, and I can't wait to sort of publish the episode. And do let me know when the book's ready, because I'll share the link around as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Amazing. Speak to you soon, Nezrin.